Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Mike Simonsen, president of Altos Research, to talk about home prices, inventory, and what he's seeing in different markets across the country. Mike, welcome back to the podcast.
Always great to be with you, Sarah.
Oh, great to have you. So, you keep an eye on everything that's going on in the country with Altos data weekly. And I thought it was really fascinating this last week. We're starting to see some markets where we can see inventory growing and prices slipping just a little bit. So would love for you to give us sort of an update on what you're seeing.
Yeah, so available inventory of unsold homes is building pretty much everywhere across the country. All states have more unsold homes now than a year ago. Some states have a lot more. So Florida and Arizona, Texas, Louisiana, like some of the southern states have maybe 60, 65% more homes on the market now than a year ago, which is a pretty significant increase. Some of the places like the Northeast are just a little bit more than a year ago, but every place is growing.
So when people hear like that 60% more than last year, that could sound like, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I mean, it's also great, but like from your perspective, considering what last year was, what does that mean to you?
So in those places where inventory is like 60% more than a year ago, those markets are basically back to pre-pandemic levels, 2019. Some of them, like Austin, Texas, are at the most inventory they've had in a decade. Austin's had a hot real estate market for more than a decade. And so that's slowing over the last 2 years. There's more homes on the market now than there has been in 10 years in Austin. So it's a big change. It's a big change with affordability. In places like Texas and Florida, you've got rapidly rising property taxes as well. You've got rising insurance costs in Florida. So you have all of those things that are making it more expensive to hold a house that you bought a few years ago. And so more of those are getting resold. And so inventory is up. And of course, demand is down as the cost of money is so much more expensive.
So what are the markets in Florida where you're seeing that? You mentioned Austin and Texas. Where are those markets in Florida?
The biggest parts of Florida that have the most inventory change are the southwest. So Sarasota and Tampa and Fort Myers, the southwest side of Florida are where the most inventory growth is. Miami is sort of a unique market into itself. And then there's like central and northern Florida, which are also increasing in inventory. But really it's most notable and has turned earliest in the year was like the Southwest markets.
So when we talk about prices, because this has been, the affordability question is really big. So when you say prices, where do you see it softening? Like, are we seeing it like go back to some level? Like you said, inventory, you can see, oh, okay, it's going back to pre-pandemic. What do prices look like?
So prices in depending on how you measure them, are up like a couple percent to maybe 5% around the country. Nationally, about, and like 2, 3, 4, 5% around the country is about a rule of thumb. There are, and that depends on how you measure prices, but there are some markets like in Florida, for example. We looked at Florida this week and we can see the prices that people are starting to pay are down from March and April, ticking down. Normally, you have a seasonal peak, and that seasonal peak would happen in June or July, and then the second half of the year, prices come down. So you have a normal cycle. The best stuff and the most demand happens in the second quarter, that peaks, and then the third and fourth quarter, it cycles down again. But in, say, for example, in Florida, it peaked in the first quarter this year, meaning that you can really see people just waiting for interest rates to finally come back down again. So we could see a fraction of price declines in a place like we looked at Florida wide, for example, this week, and I can see a fractionally down from earlier in the year at a time when it would normally be up. So it is not crashing, but there's the beginning of slipping in prices in some of those areas.
Slipping in prices, that's a really good way to describe it. So I know one of the other factors that you look at in, like, how's the housing market doing is the number of homes that take a price cut, right? That price cut percentage. So what are you seeing there?
So normally around the country, a rule of thumb is about a third of homes take a price cut before they sell. And when the market is hotter, then only 25% need to cut, but because some of those people who are fishing for bids got their bids. And when the market's cooler, suddenly it's 35 or 40 or 45% of homes need to take a price cut. And so nationally now we are over 35%. It's a little higher than normal, what we like a rule of thumb for normal for now. So more price cuts than normal is rising pretty quickly this spring in the last few months, meaning each week there are more people taking price cuts. In 2022, there was a much bigger change. So the market was slowing much more dramatically 2 years ago when rates started rising. And so at that point in 22, the country peaked at 43% of the market had price cuts. That led to year-over-year price declines in the sales numbers 6 months later. So that was spring of last year when the headlines were home prices are down year over year. And so the peak of price reductions was November of 22. So now we're at 35% and climbing, 35.5% and climbing. And so that is elevated and growing. And until mortgage rates tick back down from the sevens, maybe into the sixes, mid sixes, we're going to see that continue to grow. So then in places like Southwest Florida, it's over 50% of the homes have had price reductions. And so that's the notable price weakness. It means that sales that happen in the future will be priced lower than they are today.
So interesting. So we've talked about Florida and Texas. What about Arizona? That's another kind of a hotspot.
Yeah, and so Arizona inventory has climbed really dramatically. Arizona 2 years ago was the first market to slow, but also recovered pretty quickly in 23. Slowed again. So Arizona has, I think, a lot of investor activity. It has a lot of California migration, which can turn on or off very quickly. Those are, I think, reasons that Arizona is more volatile than a lot of other markets. And so what we're seeing right now is Arizona's inventory is up over 50% year over year. We could see some of the early signals on pricing for Arizona look like they probably turned the corner. We'll see some negative months. And then the question is, do rates inch down or do they keep inching up? And, we started the year with mortgage rates below 6, and everybody who makes these assumptions assumed that rates would be in the mid 5s by now. Maybe there would be Fed interest rate reductions, all of the things that haven't happened. So rates are actually higher than they've been. They're higher than they were last year at this time. Like, all of those things are still, until that trend churns, consumers are acting, with on less affordable terms.
So one of the things you've noted, you do a video every week that people can watch. You're obviously feeding, data. We take the data from Altos Research. A lot of people do. When you think about Florida and Texas, especially, whatever happens there, we can say, oh, well, it's two states, but it's where a lot of the home buying happens, right? Just because of inventory and the way that it works. So when you see this happening in Florida and Texas, what does that mean for the whole country?
So the changes that are happening right now are very local, or regional anyway. So Florida and Texas are big states with lots of inventory, where California is a big state, but has fewer homes for sale than either of those. So California's inventory is up too, about 35%. So that's putting homes on the market as we count nationally. But if we look at the Northeast, those markets are maybe 5-8% more homes than they were a year ago. And so just barely more. And in those areas, we've had supply constriction. So the market is constrained by not enough supply. There are more home buyers than there are sellers. So any increase in inventory is welcome in New York, upstate New York, or Massachusetts right now. Like those markets have been very tight, and their price reductions are low, and so the sellers are in a much better position in those areas right now. That though, if we continue with multiple years at higher rates, we will see, for example, next year more inventory, and so that will continue to build. So we can see that Florida, and Texas, and Arizona, and in fact Georgia is up 50% in inventory. We could see these markets are growing much more quickly. There are many parts of the country that are doing better this year are cash heavy. So, like if you look at Southern California, there are some, like Orange County is a very cash heavy buyer market, and even though it's an expensive market, those homes are going pretty quickly, and inventory is building there, but it is still a much more robust market than in some of the southern states. In some of the southern states too, you have worse FICO scores for borrowers. So home buyers have to pay more for their mortgage, relatively more than they do in other parts of the country. So that's a factor that's going on as well.
That's really interesting because we talk about the whole cost to own, right? We cost or the affordability in general. And it's more than, as you and Logan have been clear about, it's more than just the interest rate, right? It is the property taxes, it is the property insurance, but it is the cost of the mortgage too. I didn't think about it in that way, that geographically you would see FICO score differences.
Yeah, and it's pretty notable, and the Western and the Northeast have higher FICO scores than the core of the South, and therefore, when you're buying a house, your mortgage is cheaper.
Yep, that's true. Well, walk us through. So not everybody is as familiar with Altos Research as maybe they should be, because I think it's really interesting. Like you're getting these insights on a weekly basis. Can you just tell us a little bit about the different things that you track?
Yeah. So at Altos, we track every home for sale in the country every week, all the pricing, all the supply and demand, all the changes in the pricing, and then we publish out that data. So every zip code, city, county, state, metro, national levels. When I do my Monday videos, we're talking about the national data. We're looking at the national trends, and occasionally I will mention like, look at Austin, but really it's a 10, 12-minute video talking about the national trends each week. And then we cover every zip code in the country. What we've recently done, in fact, just this week, released our track of the pendings data, these are the homes that are now in contract to sell. They're not yet sold. And so the pendings data is really interesting. It is the fastest proxy for how much are people paying for the houses. Where are they selling? What prices are they selling? How fast are they selling? It's a really interesting leading indicator of what's going to sell in 30 days or 45 days. They spend 30 or 45 days in contract. You watch the homes that get listed for sale this week, and then the homes that are on the market is now a month later. Then we watch them go into contract another month later. You watch them close another month later. So you really see the pricing. You can see where they're priced all the way through that leading cycle for 3 or 4 months. And it's a really powerful way to know what the home price headlines are going to be in 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So like the Case-Shiller index or the home price indexes that we see in the headlines.
Well, it's already crazy that you do this weekly, that it's updated weekly. And obviously, we talk about it all the time on this podcast. Logan's always, using your numbers. That's how he knows what the inventory is and all of those things. But now to think that we have that pendings, that forward-looking data, that's even more impactful. What do you think that means for for your clients or for people who are looking at the data?
Yeah, so the power of using the pendings data is when you want to know where what price point are people buying? Is that going up or down? And we can watch the homes, and we can watch very quickly, for example, how quickly consumers react to mortgage rate changes. Because when rates go up, I might not stop my purchase, but I adjust my price down. And so we can watch prices adjust very quickly to mortgage rate changes. And we saw that in 2022. We saw that in last year. And then what we're looking for right now is do we see something like, if rates jump from here, from low sevens to mid sevens, do we see a price adjustment across the country as well? So we can see those things. It helps buyers and sellers for our agent and loan officer clients to sit with their buyer and sellers and say, I know that you see that homes are staying around the market, but in your price range, we can see that they're going that's the fastest price point in the market, and help them make better buying and selling decisions by seeing exactly what that active market is doing. Like, or planning the business. Are we actually going to get some sales growth this year? Well, when we watch the pendings, we can watch the new pendings each week. We can see that, therefore, the number of sales that are going to close in a month or a month and a half is climbing. So we can see all of that stuff in that pendings data before the sale happens.
That's so crazy and so exciting. We were really excited about the rollout of that this week because it's just like more data, more information. So tell us a little bit. You've been doing this for a while. What's exciting to you right now when you look at the market and you look at the data?
What's exciting in the data, it is we're in a pivotal time. We've had 2 years of rising rates, 2 years of rising inventory, and over the pandemic years, the question was, how will we ever get back to the old normal levels of inventory? And what's become clear is that multiple years at higher rates will allow the inventory to build. And if inventory builds, then rates come down a little bit. Now you can imagine a world where affordability improves a lot, supply is improved a lot, so that buyers have more options at more affordable prices. Like those kind of conditions, it's funny, but multiple years at higher rates may be how we build into a more affordable scenario in the future. We had a decade of ultra low rates, and that meant we bought everything. Supply was low, competition was high, investor money was high, and that pushed prices higher, and that pushed us into this affordability challenge. So, and it took us a decade to get to that record few homes on the market. So now we're 2 years into higher rates. What if it's 2 or 4 more years of higher rates to slowly get us back into a more normal position in the market? And so, on the one hand, that's a fascinating turn. It's on the other hand, it's like that means it's more expensive mortgage payments in the short term, and that's hard for people. So, but I think looking at that, and we talk about that, and I talk about that with the data. Higher rates is what gets us back to more inventory, but it's really hard for people to imagine that. But now we're 2 years in, and so it starts to become very obvious. And 2 more years, maybe, or even another year, if rates stay in the sevens or upper sevens in the next year, you could imagine we get from there are 600,000 or so homes on the market, single family homes on the market now. Normally, this time of year, a decade ago, would have been 1 million. Or even 800,000. So another year over 700,000, 750, like we get almost back to that old normal level. And it's less savagely unhealthy, as Logan calls it.
So, the Altos numbers are different than the NAR numbers. Maybe you can just give us a snapshot on why that is.
Yeah, so if you look at the NAR inventory numbers versus the Altos inventory numbers, what we're doing is we track at Altos every home for sale in the country every week. So you go out, and if you walk into the market right now, there are 605,000 single family homes that you can buy in the US. There'll be another 65,000 that get listed this week, and another 65,000 or so of those, 60,000 of those will get sold, and it'll build. And so that's it. When NAR reports their numbers, they're talking about last month, and they'll say all the homes that were on the market at any point in last month. And so that's useful for looking at last month. But if a house is on the market today and it gets an offer tomorrow, is it in inventory? Well, we don't think so. Like, it's not inventory. You can't buy it now. So when you look at the actual, you take the pendings, those that are pending contract, take them out of the inventory. Those aren't for sale anymore. And if you look at the NAR number, that will include a bunch of homes that are in contract and they're not in inventory. So it is a different way of understanding what is inventory. And we like to go like, how many houses could I buy today? 605,000. The other thing we do is in the videos, and like in this conversation, I'm saying 605,000. That's single family homes. There's another 180,000 condo townhomes, and I like to talk about those as separate, distinct markets, different units, different price points, and so when we're talking about median price, I like to focus on single family homes, and we have all the condo data, but when I'm doing this top level, I like to keep it apples to apples. When NAR does a number, they're like all the homes that were for sale, including, mobile homes and, whatever wacky things that get thrown in that data. And they're estimating for May when you hear it next. Right now, the latest data, I'm sure, has been April that they've announced. So those are the differences in the numbers.
Yeah, no, those are some pretty big differences, and glad you walked us through there because it's hard. Now, what about new versus existing homes?
So new construction versus existing is also a fascinating way to measure. So when is a new home construction? When is it available inventory? Is it, when you look at new home construction numbers, for the folks that analyze new home construction, inventory includes a plot of land that's got a power cord to it, but you can't buy a home there, and it might be 2 years before you could live in a home there. And so in the Altos numbers, we will use new construction that's essentially completed. It is essentially move-in ready. If it's like to be completed in 2025, we will take it out of our active inventory count. Where if you go, search on realtor.com or something, there'll be a lot of stuff like that in there that is it's a drawing of a house, but it's not a house, right? And so those are things you could buy, but they're not homes yet. So when we talk about active inventory, we're focusing on this is what you could buy today.
I love it. No, that's so interesting. Okay, so Mike forecast is that more inventory, right? Higher rates are going to continue to grow this inventory. That's going to help home prices. As you said, we see some slippage, especially in certain markets. Anything else you want to tell the audience?
I continue to expect that later in the year we'll continue to see less year-over-year home price gains. So I think the inventory gains, supply gains, and the things like the price reductions are leading indicators of future sales. So I think we will continue to see smaller and smaller home price gains and the sales number as we get later in the year. So we started the year with 6%, 5 to 6% home price gains, probably end the year closer to flat. But there's nothing in the data that shows a big price tank yet. But of course, we keep watching to see do things change.
And you'll see that pretty early. I mean, if we were heading into a rough patch, you would definitely see it.
Yeah, we'd see price reductions tick up, right? If I have my house listed and I don't get an offer I expected this weekend, next Monday I go, maybe I need to cut my price. So we see as soon as offers start going down, you see price reductions start ticking up and ticking up, accelerating. So you see that place. We track the pendings, and we can track how many homes are going into contract in a given week. And we can watch that decline. We can watch the price point at those declines. So like people still bought the house, but they bought cheaper, or they underbid, or all of those things. So we can watch those go down. And these are all signals that are way before. We can watch the new listings. So now if I list a house for sale into a really soft market, I look around the neighborhood and I say, wow, there's 4 houses, they're not selling. I'm going to price at a discount. So we can watch the price of the new listings come down. All of those things start to add up into a much more notable, price reductions for the future, sales price reduction, sales home value reductions in the future. And so we'll see all of those. And we can see slippage in some of those now.
So it makes me feel better that I'm like, okay, someone's watching all of this. Someone knows exactly what's happening. And it's Mike Simonsen. And you know what? We can ask you anytime. So Mike,
Anytime.
thanks so much for being on today. And, we'll include a link to your latest video and the write-up, but appreciate it so much. And looking forward to even more data.
And Altos customers can now get pendings data.
So that's another bonus. Okay.
Another
Thanks,
bonus.
Mike.
Thanks, Sarah.